Good evening, YouTube. Tyler Metalhead Weatherman here. Just real quick before the game gets started here, because I will be watching, of course. I'm a big football fan, by the way. We got a little bit of activity going on later this week. We've been talking about the storm system for a while, but now the Storm Prediction Center is really starting to hone in on some things. So we'll go ahead and just jump right into it. But on the 12th now, we have a slight risk for severe weather. This is going to be mainly highlighted for the southeast, but I'm also going to go over the marginal risks that are expected over the next 3 days, including Wednesday in particular, because that area is pretty wide and could even be upgraded potentially to a slight risk, depending on how the parameters unfold here. So we're going to go ahead and just take a look at what we have going on tonight. Not a very big area, it's very small. Main threat with this will be a slight chance for a spin up and maybe a damaging wind gust, but this is mainly going to be off the west coast here. San Francisco is involved in this as well, interestingly enough. Not an area that you really think of for severe weather, but the threat is there tonight, and this also will be lingering into tomorrow, but this will mainly be a little bit further to the south. Now we're looking at areas like San Diego, Los Angeles, Santa Barbara in play for severe weather. Threat's the same, mainly tornadoes and wind. The hail threat really doesn't exist with this one. Lapse rates aren't really built up for this to really bring any hail in. Again, relatively isolated threat. Small chance of maybe a spin up. Small chance of a damaging wind gust or two. No surprises there. Then we get to day 3. Day 3, things get a lot more interesting. We're getting over to that area that we keep seeing it involved in severe weather towards the Ozarks and Mississippi River Valley, and then also we're getting a little bit more action towards the Tennessee regions, maybe getting closer towards that Tennessee Valley. In that marginal risk, we're looking at areas just to the east of Dallas here towards eastern Texas. We're also looking at Lufkin getting involved in the action here. Eastern Oklahoma, far eastern Oklahoma I should say. We got to be watching you guys, and then we look towards north central Louisiana. We're looking at Alexandria, Shreveport. Then we're getting towards north and north central Mississippi, Jackson, Greenville, Smithville, many other areas within Mississippi's borders could be in line for some possibly severe storms. Then Tennessee, we're looking at Memphis and Jackson and other assorted small cities involved there. We can't leave out the small little portion or boot handle of Missouri too, and small parts of southwestern Kentucky with a chance of severe weather. I do think, again, the main threat is going to be damaging winds. The system, we've been talking about it for a bit now, has a very linear look to it. Can't rule out an embedded supercell within the line maybe producing a quick spin up tornado, but I'm not expecting anything magnanimous out of that. Then we go to day 4. Day 4 now, this is where things get really interesting. We get a day 4 slight risk, and this includes Alabama and Georgia here. And I'm a little bit more interested in this sector a little further south, where there could be a little less forcing available and maybe a greater chance of a tornado. I don't think this will be what drives our slight risk. It will mainly be damaging winds. But this is where our warm sector is going to be most abundant. We're going to have plenty of moisture available. We went over this in last night's video, or yesterday afternoon's video, I should say. And I'll leave a link to that in the top right within some point of this video. I think it'll probably be around this time. But the cities that we have involved here: Tuscaloosa, with Birmingham. We have Montgomery. Atlanta's in there as well. Sandy Springs, Georgia, you're in there as well. Macon, Columbus, you're in there. Areas further towards the north, I'd say even as far north as Chattanooga, just on the Georgia-Tennessee border. We're watching you closely. Athens, you're in there as well, so this could be something that ends up hampering the festivities later into the week, possibly, if you're trying to celebrate all week. So keep an eye out there in case you guys win the game tonight. No guarantees, because we all thought TCU wasn't even going to be in the game anyway. That being said, we have our slight risk for Thursday, and then after Friday, it looks like things will start to calm down from that point. So let's go ahead and look at the models now. I mean, we already know what's coming here. There's no need to go over 3 different models. They've been pretty much in agreement for the last few days, so no surprises here as far as the severe threat is concerned. We may talk about the snowy side tomorrow morning, because there is a little bit of a wintry side with this, but mainly tonight we're talking severe weather. We're also just outside of the range of the short range models, so of course this video will end up probably being revised within the next 24 hours. But basically, this is what we have going on here. Here's our system coming in to the western half of the country by the early morning hours of the 11th. Not a super robust system until it gets about here on the evening hours of the 11th. There isn't really too much out ahead of this. There isn't really too much expected out ahead of this line, but I do think in an area a little bit further to the north here towards maybe central Arkansas, northern Louisiana, the threat for damaging winds and maybe a spin up tornado is possible. Most of these storms are going to be associated with the cold front that's going to be out ahead of this low pressure here. And we're going to watch this progress further and further off to the east, and these storms are going to be allowed to intensify as time goes on. There is a point here too where it looks like in the early afternoon hours of Thursday where we could see potential for not only a line of storms but maybe even 2 rounds. Mainly going to be rain on the second round, but the first round will have our greatest severe potential. Can't rule out a spin up or 2, and then as this moves in we start to lose our severe potential entirely. We have to watch the cold air that comes in on the backside of this, especially towards the Ohio Valley, where I'm thinking snow could be possible though on the 13th. But that will be a later video as we aren't in range on this 18Z Euro. Let's go ahead and take a look also at the dew points and some of the other parameters available. We're going to kind of be highlighting where our area of greatest interest will be alongside our temperatures. I mean, we have a general idea just based off of yesterday's look, but we'll make sure we're covering all our ends here. When we look at the 10th heading into the 11th, we can already see that moisture starting to build here, and these storms aren't going to really fire off till later into the evening. So as time goes on over in this region here, and I'm mainly looking at eastern Texas as an area of greatest interest, but we're seeing dew points into the 60s, which are sufficient enough for severe weather. Really 55 degrees on the dew points would be efficient enough, but when you start to get into those 60s, those are usually going to be what draw the most eyes as far as the Storm Prediction Center is concerned, and pretty much any other meteorologist. The dynamics seem like they're going to be a little bit further north, so this is going to be one of probably several factors that will limit the tornado threat in total, which is better news for this area, as we've been seeing a lot of activity over this region and they just can't seem to get a break. But it looks like more severe weather still will be coming through, albeit in the form of damaging winds this time. When we look towards the early morning hours of Thursday, we can see that moist sector begins to really feed into Alabama, and then eventually Georgia as the front starts to pass through. So we're watching this area as time goes on, heading into the evening hours, and then of course by the time we get through this region, most of the instability will probably be out of here. May have to watch the Carolina coast for a couple of severe storms, but this system will be merely a shadow of its former self from the looks of it by this point. Alright, so let's go ahead and take a look at the temperature, and we'll see how these two pretty much coincide with one another, and this will be what ends up creating our greatest area of concern here. Jump this forward, and we can, as you can see, warm sector is really abundant by 10th over here towards southern Texas. Eastern Texas is where the area of greatest concern will end up being. And I'll go ahead and try and take a sounding of this, but by this point, most of the, like I said, most of the dynamics don't lean towards a tornado threat. Not a whole lot of cape to work with, especially in the mixed layer. And we'll look at the cape on the map in particular, but the hordeograph isn't impressive. The skew T isn't impressive with this. Nothing we weren't expecting here. And as time goes on, we'll roll this towards, I'd say, maybe 18Z, and then we'll start to see the southeast really start to heat up here. This is gonna be where our battle zone is, right about here. I'd say by the afternoon hours. And you can see right here as I took a look at this sounding, this is where the front's already started to pass. Dew points are starting to drop into the 40s, and the temperatures dropping into the 60s within that region. And throughout the day, once this front passes through, the temperatures are going to drop notably. And as we jump out ahead here, look at that. Boom. Hordeograph's impressive, especially towards the lower levels. Like I said, you can't rule out a spin up or two with this setup. Mid-level lapse rates to a higher level atmospheric lapse rates aren't that impressive, but they're considerable enough to where we could get maybe a spin up. And towards the low level, as far as the helicity, not the worst that I've seen. It's actually moderately impressive, I would say. 267 squared or meters squared per second squared. That's not bad, especially for a setup like this. So again, can't rule out the threat of a tornado, and this is towards my neck of the woods here, downtown Atlanta. We're watching you guys towards the early afternoon hours. A little further to the south, I'm actually a little bit more concerned, I would say. Maybe towards Columbus. Look at that. That actually looks a little bit more favorable. Those lapse rates are a little bit lower into the atmosphere, and I think that the chance of a tornado is a little bit better here. But even so, I'm thinking mainly damaging winds is going to be the deal here. I really don't see a lot of this mixing all the way to the surface, which is a key factor in tornado genesis. But still, that's just proof that the threat is there. So as we move this forward, the front passes through, and you can see the difference right here immediately. This is where 70s exist, and now we're getting into the 30s and 40s over these same regions that were just hit. And that's pretty much the end of the model run here. So now that we've looked at that, let's go ahead and take a look at our cape values, how the temperature and the dew points kind of translate. Me personally, I tend to look more so at the mixed layer cape more so than anything else. Mixed layer cape usually gives a really good profile of what the atmosphere is doing at all levels. Surface based cape is a good way of looking, but it's, like I said, it's surface based cape. You're only going to get an idea of what's going on at the surface. And a lot of severe weather can end up happening based off what's going on in all levels of the atmosphere. Just about all events, actually. So here's one, like I said, this isn't going to be a high cape event. This is going to be one reason why these storms are going to be limited as far as their potential is concerned. It's only going to be so high of a ceiling. But one thing to note again, it's towards the evening hours where we're going to be looking towards eastern Texas right here, and we'll take a sounding of that really quick as well. And of course, lo and behold, marginal severe threat. Look at the dew points, 60s, temperatures in the 70s. Supercell expectation is pretty weak though, and even with this being one of the better soundings I've seen, mixed layer is only at 862 joules per kilogram. Really, in reality, you want to see about 1,000 in order to be more concerned about all hazard types. So, like I said, it's going to be very limited on Wednesday, and things don't really look any better until Thursday. But the cape values aren't that impressive even then. Here's a look more so towards Birmingham at the cape values, and we're only averaging out at about 581. And even so, we still have a pretty impressive setup for what could be a couple of tornadoes, possibly. especially when we look at the hordeograph here at the low levels. And I think that's what the main thing we're concerned with here is the fact that we have as much vorticity and as much spin as we do with these storms that will most likely be in a line. Is that within those lines there could be embedded little kinks here, and those kinks are what we were going to have to watch closely for the development, not only of damaging straight line winds, but quick spin ups. They're going to be fast if they do form. They're going to touch down briefly, do whatever damage they can, and then they're going to lift, and then a new storm may cycle and take over on that process here. If you want to see how all of that works, how to read that on radar, I'll have a video on the top right corner here. It's part of my Weather Nerd 101 playlist if you're wanting to get more in depth on that. But here is the end of that storm system coming through on Friday morning. Not going to be a factor for the US anymore. And then we'll have to watch the snow threat from this point while we gear up for that much bigger storm system that will be coming in around the mid-month time frame. So let's go ahead now and take a final look at what our precip may look like. So here's that storm system coming in on the 10th, really starting to develop itself pretty well on the 11th. We're a sub 1000 storm here at this point, or sub 1000 millibar storm at this point. Storms start to fire into the late evening hours here, and we start to get our line beginning to consolidate into the overnight hours. But you can almost see these little line segments here as we head into Thursday morning into Thursday afternoon. This is about maybe 7 o'clock in the morning, 6 o'clock central. You could see there's a linear look to it, but just based off of this, there's a couple of segments where we can see little small pieces where they try to go into a semi-discrete mode. And as time goes on, this persists, and this is where the tornado threat kind of exists here. And then as we move this forward, as we go further to the east, the dynamics really start to fade, and then we'll watch this system really start to blossom as it heads over towards the Great Lakes and parts of the Ohio Valley, bringing snow and potentially even ice over to these regions. And then we'll have to watch on the backside as any leftover moisture will eventually freeze as it gets behind that 32-degree line, which is our 540 line here. But this has been relatively, hopefully a little bit quicker of a rundown of what we have going on here. I'd love to get into the short range models, but we're just not quite there. The longest range short range model I could look at is the NAM 3 kilometer, but as of right now, we're just a little bit too far outside of the range here, where we can only look at it maybe as far as early Thursday morning, which is when most of the bigger parts of the event start to unfold. I'll have a video out tomorrow that's showing what the convective models have for us here, and we'll get more in depth from that point. So I hope to see you guys there then. But the game looks like it's gotten started here as well. I'm gonna go ahead and enjoy that. I hope you guys do the same. If not, I want you guys to have a good night. Take care, and make sure you have a plan in case the weather starts to go down south. There's no need to worry. But anyway, it's been Tyler Metalhead Weatherman. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'll see you guys in the next one. Have a good night.